So, the sub drop news has been around for a while, but it's not really news to Blizzard. They already knew this before the earnings call and probably saw the trend around January. Started to see that dip around January, and the team working on the game must have been talking about this for a while in their meetings or whatnot. Uh, it makes me wonder what ideas they've been going through ever since, or what they've been planning to do about it, or if they had any solid plans to do anything about it. While drops in sub count are expected, it is still a very staggering loss when you think about it, given the very impressive start of Jenner. Uh, Minus the server load hassle on the first 3 days, I was pretty much impressed with the way it launched. From just even from a casual point of view, the questing was pretty great. Although I hear it was gutted, according to some people. The setting was pretty neat. I so far, just the setting itself, I like the setting of Jenner overall. Uh, the early take on garrisons were pretty good. The idea was pretty neat too. Profession catch-ups via the garrison was also kind of okay. The story, although a bit wonky, was workable given that they were messing up with the timeline and alternate histories, and basically a whole lot of other things made it reasonable that Warlords of Jenner would see the sub leap it did see some months back. It did have a number of issues from launch, so let's say overdone ability pruning, cutting down the major capital hubs in Jenner, professions being reworked to a point that they weren't really entirely useful, and maybe other things. But the positives really just brought people back in. The thing is, though, as the weeks and the months rolled on, you start to see the bigger issues pop up, and whatever was good initially turned out to be not so good things. You realize there wasn't much meat to the expansion. It seems like there's a whole lot, but there isn't much substance at all. Here are some, for this video, here are just some of my ideas or areas in the game that I feel contributed to the drop. So I just want to be clear that these are my own opinions on the matter. If you search the web, you will find a bazillion opinions on why Quarter 1 ended up the way it did for Blizzard, or World of Warcraft in particular. So you can just add yours in the comment section below if you want to. So I think the first area that Blizzard could have worked on was garrisons. And this is really a common complaint. While it does seem neat being the commander and having your own base lead the alliance or horde forces on Draenor, it tied you down to one area where you were phased and didn't see anyone else. It's an okay replacement, just okay replacement for the player housing that many have been asking for, and it does have those convenience features by the mines, the garden, and the followers, but it still made player interactions deteriorate. I normally play alone, but it's still great to see other players running around even during downtimes. The garrison's biggest problem is that it led you to visual detachment. You can still talk to people in chat or in voice comms, but visually all you see in your garrisons are NPCs. If you check your guild list or ask your battle tag friends where they are, you'll just find out they're just chilling in their garrisons. What I wish is that they maintained the Bladespire and Karabor capital city concepts when they were preparing Draenor for us. The garrisons themselves could have been smaller parts of these defunct ideas and maintain the phasing technology at the command table level. All other areas could have been shared by players, much like the common faction area in Asheron. This would have led to a more visually appealing or a livelier world with more players running around and interacting. The phase garrison in a hub could have allowed more customization, pretty much like WildStar, if they really wanted to give the player housing idea a go. One other thing that might have required more work on their part is to, basically have racially themed garrisons if you're into, being leveling alts. These would have also allowed some variety when leveling your alts and drainers. But it's basically just the garrison, the way it's set up, the way that you feel like you're in a single player game that's not really role playing, an RPG. So yeah, that's the first one. It's the way garrisons have been set up. So this just leads me to the second area where they could have done so much better. its professions. So professions did not have to be in a very, very significant way tied down to the garrison. It could have been integrated into the city hub as a non-phased area. The catch-up mechanic is great. I find it very useful with my alts, but it should have been only limited to that. The points to be gained for the Draenor professions, if that's from 600 to 700, could have still required players to run around Draenor and to get the required mats. You can actually do that, but when you level your garrison and max it out, you normally have a workable amount of resources that requires less time to be out in the world, which again, brings me back to the first point, which is the way garrisons were set up. It just keeps bringing you back into your garrison. In addition, some professions had their uses limited. If you wanted to remove bonuses to combat, give it something else that that players may want in equal value. For example, the leather workers now have a dustmane mount for their profession, and it's pretty decent. But other professions lack the perk that perk value that leatherworking has. So, really, it's taking away something out of something that was pretty good even before, and you can't replace it with anything else. That's just pretty bad. Um, Tie this also into the lack of diversity in the gemming process or the enchanting process. If you have those professions, I simply don't understand why you would take away the idea of being able to buff your existing gear. A very large part of this game revolves around gear and optimizing them. So I don't know why they would take gear is such as a very central point in the game. It's a if you take away all other aspects, it's simply a gear grind. And this will simply lead me to the third point, which is in terms of being able to buff your existing gear with gems and enchants. Now you remove the aspect of the game that made made some gear with uninteresting stats workable. I don't understand why you would remove that. Sure, it became a somewhat of an automatic process via this. I forgot the add-on, but it made it a very automatic process. But at least it made boring stats in some of your gear somewhat interesting via a doable conversion process. One of the things that really sucks is that, let's say you're in a raid, whether any kind of raid, it sucks having to look at the gear you obtained and find some stats that could have been allocated elsewhere. Having the option to reforge made them slightly better until you could get a different type of gear from a different instance, maybe from your garrison missions, or whatever. So basically, the lack of reforging, and when you couple it with everything else that's been happening in Draenor, it's just made gear obtaining gear a big mess and a hassle. The fourth point is basically the way abilities and stats were designed in Draenor. Um, you know, while some pruning ideas made sense, the others were just wrong or unnecessary. For example, the lack of choice for druid forms. Why did it become an automatic thing? Shapeshifting is part and parcel of the druid class. They removed the aspect of choice. I enjoyed very much being able to switch into whatever form I wanted to during when moving traveling out in the world. I don't know why you would make that choice for me. It's a shape-shifting class. Removing, I mean, sure, it's still there in combat. You can shift into bear form, cat form, but I don't know why you wouldn't be able to manually do it. Maybe I could have settled for something like have an automatic toggle for players who wanted that option. Maybe a manual process for those who prefer the old way of doing it. So what about arms, warriors, and overpower? So I think I talked about this in my defensive stance PvP video. I really miss the way arms warriors were set up in Mists of Pandaria. Um, Replacing overpower with whirlwind just felt very off. I it just felt so wrong for me to be twirling around like that when overpower was a much better ability. You could of course rework the abilities with the removal of dodge and things like that, but yeah, removing dodge and parry, that's another thing. And other stats that other goal stats for tanks and DPS, I feel that Yeah, sure, it made it easier to focus on what matters, but they weren't exactly terrible or difficult numbers to watch, in my opinion. It just made it um, things, additional things that you could work on as a tank or as a DPS player. And there are many other examples of changes and simplifications that went too far, but the reason for removing complexities always has to be justified. Thinking of finding ways to optimize your class has always been there in World of Warcraft, and removing too much of that aspect simply isn't good. One other area that I feel Blizzard should have done better in is the gating of content. So, whether it's a time gate or a faction rep gate, too much is not good. To be clear, gating is a decent concept like the Proving Grounds, which is a requirement for heroic dungeons. Now, the problem is, well, one example I can think of is in the PvP area. Um, some of the PvP pieces were gated to faction rep, and it made me wonder why it wasn't simply done the way it was done before. You know, if you, well, I haven't done a whole lot of PvP in this expansion, mainly because my previous arena partner is no longer around the game. He's been busy with stuff, business, and family. But anyway, um, if you think about it, a PvP focused player doesn't need rep with a faction to get the gear. Yeah, I'm sure you could say that he can join or participate in Blizzard's Ashran, but what if a player just wants to focus on battlegrounds in arena? I mean, arena is I find the thrill of arena games amazing. Win or lose, it's still a great thing. But I don't understand why you have to tie gear to a faction gate. I mean, if you want to earn your gear via, being good at PvP or just spending a whole lot of time in PvP via battlegrounds and arena, then you should be able to get your gear. I mean, why go to Ashran if you don't want to? I know it's their design, but limiting players in this manner is not good. Now, too much getting of content in general, the way you release stuff for players to do, is also not good. I mean, I mentioned this in my recent Crave Talk video, that companies with more or less a steady revenue stream via the subscription model need to keep up. I mean, with other companies that go through heavily rely on the cash shop for their revenue, it's very unpredictable what they get on a monthly basis. Sure, it's pretty much a lot. I mean, I've seen the record, the stats for other games that use the cash shop heavily, but Blizzard has a subscription model. They should be able to more or less better predict the revenue they're expecting, on a monthly basis. So in addition to being able to deliver, basically, we do expect them a full game from them at launch, but the revenue model that Blizzard has should help them to, allocate more resources to keep players happy at the pace that is close to what they want. Now, I'm not saying at the pace that the ideal player, the one who can spend 6 or 8 hours into the game a day. I'm talking about, maybe the average pace, the average ideal for most players. And, as you've seen, most players are just consume content so much faster nowadays. So, gating content, whether it's because you have to get faction rep or, basically you just want to put on hold the release of content so that you're not running out of stuff for your gamers to do, that's not good. So point number 6 is Blizzard introduced or having more mobile device ideas into their game. I mean, it's great when you add social media aspects and fire and forget concepts into a game. They're great for when you're away from your computer or the game, or when you want your friends to get involved, or when you simply want something done with a few mouse clicks. I mean, hey, convenience is convenience after all. But the thing is, that should not be one of the highlights of a content patch or the meat of your game in general. If if you want to game with a mobile mindset, there's a whole bunch of them out there that most of them are pretty much not worth it. But well, there's one game that I can think of that's worth it, and that's one of their other games, which is Hearthstone, which is really excellent. It's an excellent game, by the way, if your connection will hold. These mobile type concepts could have been simply just introduced into the mobile armory app, Spending time in game to click a few mouse buttons with hardly any visual impact is not fun when you're sitting in front of your computer. The content, this is what I feel, and content has to have, an impact on multiple areas for it to be fun. So it has to, basically for me, involve meaningful actions, visual and auditory affirmations, and if if possible, a connection to whatever storyline or goal that you have in the game. And having all those makes any kind of game inviting. And this is what I feel is lacking right now in Drenner. It's just click, 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 a few mouse clicks, and you're done. It's just not inviting. It's something I can do with my phone. It's something I can do on my tablet, but not. It's not something I want to do heavily on my PC. Quality and quantity. It's it's great that the quality of the raids in World of Warcraft haven't suffered over time. The game's raids and dungeons, compared to other MMOs, are still considered some of the very best. Yeah, sure, you can see recycled mechanics at times, but Blizzard didn't just do simple tank and spank or focus on high health pools or just, focusing on damage numbers. Still, think about it. How many dungeons and raids have been in this expansion so far? There's a decent count, but really, how many how do we have so far? Now, sometimes browse the forums, the official forums, and there is this well-written post on the forums, and I'll add the link in the description below. Absalom, the one who posted the information, did a count on the number of content available per expansion, and we see so far the differences offered. To be fair, Warlords of Jenner is still ongoing, so it's best to look at it on a sort of a maybe a per patch basis. Um, the thread branched into many interesting ideas from other players on the content that could have been and should have been added into the game. So far, the numbers aren't boding well for Warlords when all is said and done. Uh, and the funny thing here is that even before Jenner, Blizzard ideally wanted to do a yearly expansion release. At the moment, they're not really showing the agility and speed needed to realize that goal. I mean, I say about this whole quantity and quality thing. I say maintain the quality, but keep up in terms of quantity. Uh, it's just like that earlier point I said, about being able to consume it very fast. Younger players and newer players to the game, especially if they've been on other MMOs or most other games, they just consume content so much faster. Now, older players like myself, sure, we aren't as quick, and I'm not speaking for everyone who's an older gamer, but we know what your game is like, Blizzard, and it's really not that hard to plow through whatever content you've made. So really, the quality is there, at least in terms of the raids and the dungeons, but you simply have to keep up and produce more content. And I think I'll stop here, although I do have a few more things in mind. I mean, its age, along with the loss of that old feeling of the newness of the game, are big factors to consider. But that reason is always out there, and I just wanted to focus on the specifics for this expansion. The stuff I said are the ones that really stand out for me personally. I mentioned in my recent video that I did think of going through my usual unsub phase for a while, mainly because of the current state did not justify me paying the monthly subscription. It could be that I do need other games to occupy my time, but Jenner sure doesn't sure doesn't draw me in as much. Um, I backlogged two other games when I still found Jenner to be fun. Now I find myself playing them more and more. Well, to be honest, I'm glad the token system is here because some parts of the game, some parts of Jenner are still really fun. Not all of it, but some are still fun. So, with the token system, I can still log in and do stuff and not feel like it, and really just feel like it's okay to play. Well, Blizzard's other titles are doing well, and that's pretty good. That's really good for them. But I sure hope they don't let WoW decline too fast, as I do personally really like the game itself. Um, you hear people saying that it's dying, it's going free to play and all those things. I really hope those doomsayers are wrong, but but If they are right and the game is really on its way out, I hope it's a really slow and graceful process. That it doesn't become an outright meaningless abandonment of effort stained by, excessive revenue scraping design. That it doesn't become an all too obvious and, unabashed, complete shift of focus on other games they maintain, other games that, they seem to be earning more from. Anyway, I wanted to share my thoughts on the whole matter, and maybe Blizzard can do something about it. Thanks for watching.